Notice that on top I changed the title from Secrets from the Zohar to Secrets from Kabbalah, because today we're going to be diverging away from the Zohar. Just for tonight, because tonight is a very special night. Today, in fact, was the special day, the 5th of Av. It is the Yahrtzeit of the Arizal, who's considered to be one of the fathers of Kabbalah. In today's day, anybody whose Kabbalistic works don't go through the teachings of Lurianic Kabbalah is not considered accepted in mainstream Kabbalistic work. The Arizal was an incredible, incredible soul. It's amazing that his Yahrtzeit is smack in the middle of the 9 days, which are the saddest time for the Jewish people, and yet a Yahrtzeit of a tzaddik is such a sublime and elevated day, and you couldn't make this up. Hashem for sure orchestrated that in the darkest time, the greatest light ascends. So we're marking this day, and I figured it's an appropriate day to speak a little bit about the Arizal, and we're also going to study from his teachings. Wow, I'm just looking at I didn't realize my notes were so long. I never have so many notes for a class, but I just couldn't stop with the research. I doubt I'm going to get to half the stuff here, but I'm very excited for this because it's very meaningful. I consider myself a student of the Arizal, having studied lots of Chabad Hasidus, which is primarily based on the teachings of the Arizal. So this day means a lot to me personally as well. The Arizal was a neshama that we didn't deserve. He was a soul that this world didn't deserve. In fact, there's an amazing tradition, and that you can see in your sheet, in source 1, which is a verse from Tehillim, chapter 68, where the giving of the Torah is described, and Moshe Rabbeinu is described as ascending to heaven. And look at this verse, it says in verse 19, Alisa lamoraim shavisa shevi. You ascended on high, you took captives. Moshe Rabbeinu is said to have taken captives on his journey to heaven to receive the Torah. So the Kabbalistic works tell us, what is this captive? The captive was 2 souls that Moshe Rabbeinu captured on behalf of our world. Number 1, it's hinted in the word Shevi. You see the next line there? Shevi, captive, Shin Bet Yut. If you read it forward, it stands for Shimon Bar Yochai. And if you read it backwards, Yud Bet Shin, it's Yitzchak ben Shlomo, who was the Arizal. Amazing. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, the father of Kabbalah, and the Arizal, the modern day iteration of Kabbalistic teaching and the Messianic version of it, were literally souls that Moshe Rabbeinu had to capture for our world to benefit from. The Rebbe once said he was on the level of a Navi, of a prophet. Unbelievable. So,
what year did he live?
I'll get to that in a second. So we're going to do a brief biography on him. I'm going to attempt to describe the type of a giant that he was. I'm also going to give you his place a little bit in Kabbalistic literature, and we're going to go through also one of his teachings. The Arizal was born in the year 1534 in Israel, in Yerushalayim. His father was an Ashkenazi. His mother was a Sephardi, one of those interracial couples. His father was Rabbi Shlomo Luria. His mother was, I forget her first name, but her last name was Francis. And they lived in Jerusalem. Unfortunately, when the Arizal was just 8 years old, his father died. His mother tried to make it alone, but after a few months, she realized it wasn't going to happen. So she traveled to Egypt, where her brother lived. Her brother Mordechai lived in Egypt, and he supported the family. Mordechai had a daughter who the Arizal ended up marrying at 15 years old. He married his first cousin, yeah. During that time, he had 2 daughters and a son. The son later passed away in an epidemic that was attributed to a decree from heaven. But his daughters lived and married great Kabbalists in their own right. He spent most of his life in Egypt, where he studied both the revealed parts of Torah and began his access to Kabbalah. He studied the revealed parts of Torah under the famous Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi. Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi wrote the Talmudic work that's today known as Shita Mekubetzet, He gathered in the writings like an anthology of all the early classic Talmudic commentators with his own commentary on it. The Arizal was so attached to this teacher of his that he actually took on his last name. The Arizal's last name, as we know it, is Ashkenazi. And it comes from this teacher, Rabbi Betzalel. He also studied under the Radvaz, Rabbi David ben Zimra, who was also a tremendous Torah scholar, one of the primary commentators on the Rambam and Maimonides. And it's not clear exactly when, but at a certain point, he got his hands on a Kabbalistic manuscript that excited him to no end. That's what we know about it. Some say it was early copies of the Zohar. The Zohar was revealed in the 12th, 13th century, as we discussed in the beginning of this series. Either it was the Zohar manuscript or it was other Kabbalistic works, and he was so enamored with the study, he went into a seclusion of sorts, really learning and applying this methodology. He used to live in a little hut by the river all week on his own, meditating in prayer. He would come home on Shabbat.
In Egypt?
This is in Egypt. This is still in Egypt. Still in Egypt. Yeah. And he would,
Away from his
he spent all week away from his wife and children. For Shabbat, he would come home. He would only speak the biblical Hebrew on Shabbat. Lashon Kodesh, he spoke only on Shabbos. During this time, we have multiple testimonials. He merited the revelation of Elijah the prophet. Eliyahu Hanavi came and studied with him. In fact, the Alter Rebbe writes that Kol Devarav Mipi Eliyahu, all the words of the Arizal are straight from the mouth of Elijah the prophet. And in fact, at a certain point in history, when he was asked, the Alter Rebbe was asked to debate the Vilna Gaon, who was the head of the opposition at the time to the Chassidus, he said that one of the reasons he didn't want to debate him was because of this very point. Because he believed that the Arizal, Kol Devarav Mipi Eliyahu, all his words were from Eliyahu, while the Gaon of Vilna didn't believe that. He said, Rov Devarav, most of the words are from Eliyahu, but not all of them. Some of the words of the Arizal you could argue with. So Alter Rebbe said for that reason he doesn't want to debate him. But for 7 years he learned from Eliyahu Hanavi. Again, the years are not exactly so clear, but somewhere around the age of 35, he got a revelation from a soul in the chamber of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in heaven. And the soul communicated to the Arizal, he said, you need to move to Israel. You need to move to the city of Tzfat. Over there, a student awaits you. His name is Rabbi Chaim Vital. And you need to teach him the secrets of Kabbalah to repay him for the fact that in your previous incarnation, he taught you. Rabbi Chaim Vital, also in multiple places, was told by the Arizal that he was a reincarnation of Rabbi Akiva. And the Arizal himself was a reincarnation of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So in the Talmud, Rabbi Akiva was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's teacher. And as repayment for that, the Arizal was destined to teach Rabbi Chaim Vital all the secrets of Kabbalah. And he did. He moved. He moved with his family to Tzfat. We don't know again exactly which year, but we know that he lived there for sure for 2 years because he passed away in 1572 at age 38, a young man. The Arizal passed away at age 38 years old. And we know for sure that he was already in Tzfat in the summer of 1570. How do we know this? Very interesting. The summer of 1570, yes, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero passed away, the Ramak. The Ramak was the preeminent teacher before the Arizal of Kabbalah in Tzfat. He wrote the famous work called the Pardes, the pomegranate orchard, and he was like the Kabbalist in Tzfat at the time. He passed away in 1570, and the Arizal said a eulogy at his funeral. That we know. So he was already there for sure at that time, and he passed away today, Hey Av, in 1572. So definitely a little over 2 years he was there. You know what? Interesting. We know what he said in this eulogy on the Ramak. Check out the source 2. Source 2 on your sheet. This is a verse that describes literally what to do when somebody is killed by the court. Of course, there are certain sins that are punishable by death. And in certain cases, after being put to death, the corpse is to be hung just until the end of the day. This is where the law of burial on the day of death comes from. The Torah says when a person is put to death, you hang him on a tree to display this is a man who went against the Jewish court and was killed. and before sunset you must take him down and bury him that day. But here's how the verse describes it. It says, "V'chiyev ish chet mishpat mavet v'humat," literally translated as, if a man commits a sin for which he is sentenced to death, v'talita oto al eitz. So after he's put to death, you hang him on a pole on a tree. Said the Arizal, you have to read this verse very differently. The word chet, besides for meaning sin, also means a lacking. Huh? A lacking. So he says, "V'chiyev ish." I kind of summarized that on the bottom here. If there is a man, chet mishpat mavet, who lacks a reason to be judged to death. You look at this man, you look at his life, and you see no reason why he deserves to die. He never sinned. He never did anything wrong. Yet, v'humat, yet he dies. You're standing at his funeral. Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, the father of Kabbalah in our times, no reason to die. But here he is in a coffin in front of us. What do we do about that? Said the Arizal, v'talita. Talita means to hang, but it also means you can blame it. You blame it on the tree. Which tree? The tree of knowledge. The only reason this person passed away is because Hashem decreed death on every human being after the sin of the tree of knowledge. Unbelievable. That was the hesped, that was the eulogy to bring out how great the Ramak was. And the Rebbe once said a whole talk on this, because the Talmud says that there were 4 people in history that only died because of the counsel of the snake. Which means they had no sin, and the only reason they died was because of the snake and the story of the tree of knowledge. So what's the Arizal adding a 5th person over here? The Talmud says only 4. He says the 5th one. So the Rebbe says you have to look at the difference in the wording. The Talmud says the snake caused it. The snake was the negative force. The Yetzer Hara used to exist outside of the human being, not inside. After the sin of the tree of knowledge, it went inside. It used to be just outside. So the Talmud says there were 4 people who died, but they died because of the snake. That means that they had some connection to the negative forces as well. The Ramak was even greater than that. Him we blamed on the tree, not the snake. A different part of it. The tree is more reminiscent of the divine mission of mortality. Not the negative energy of mortality, but the fact that Hashem wants that finite and infinite should combine in a mortal human being, and therefore he passed away. So it's a little bit of a different angle. But the point is how great he was. The Arizal studied under the Ramak. When he came to Tzfat at first, he never gave any public speeches. He knew that he was destined to be a teacher, but he didn't start. While the Ramak was alive for those 2 years, for those couple of months when he first came, he didn't say a word.
This was part of the eulogy.
That was the eulogy, yeah. Just before the Ramak passed away, he said that his successor is going to be revealed at his funeral. And the way you're going to know who the successor is the student who will identify the pillar of fire that's going before his coffin. He's the one to be the leader. And no students were able to see it besides for the Arizal. The Arizal saw the pillar of fire in front of the Ramak's coffin, so he was the chosen successor. And he led for 2 years, from the summer of 1570 to the summer of 1572.
So he said that, and then he's the only one who saw it?
Yes. No, his teacher said it.
Oh, his teacher said it.
The Ramak said that the one student who sees the pillar of fire will be my successor, and the Arizal was the one who saw it. After the Ramak passed away, the Arizal began to speak Kabbalah publicly. In the beginning, it was a little bit disputed. His teacher, the Radvaz from Egypt, had by this time moved to Israel, and when he heard that his student is giving Kabbalah lectures, he called him into his office. He said, "Don't do this. This is the light that the world is not prepared for yet." And the Arizal didn't listen. The Arizal kept teaching. So after the next lecture, the Radvaz called him back. And on his way, this is written by the Chidah, the Holy Chidah writes this in his book, that on the way back to the second summons, Elijah the prophet appeared to the Radvaz and said, "You don't know what's coming here. The Arizal is meant to do this. Let him teach." And so by the time he came to his office, he had already experienced this exchange, and he told him, keep doing what you're doing. Keep at it. Be strong. This is the mission. In the beginning, some of the students of the Ramak, who the Arizal was teaching, they didn't understand his language. He was so deep. So one Motzei Shabbat, one Saturday night, he took them to nearby Tiberias, to the Kinneret, and he pulled out a cup of water, he gave them to drink. According to the Talmud, the rock that would house the well of Miriam in the desert that gave the Jews water ended up in Tiberias, in the Kinneret. It's even brought down in the Code of Jewish Law that it's a segula to drink from that water on Saturday night. And he gave his student to drink, and from then on, he started understanding. He was enlightened based on this holy, pure water. Amazing stuff. Anyway, if you think about it, the whole leadership time was just 2 years, from 1570, 1572, and in that short time, he produced all the teachings and the writings that we have today. Today we have a set that's called Kitvei Arizal, the writings of the Arizal, more than 10 books in some prints. A huge amount of Torah that he taught, a fountain, during this time of the 2 years. However, interestingly, he barely authored anything himself. He wrote a small work expounding on parts of the Zohar, but the lion's share of his work was transcribed by his students. He would teach orally, and Rabbi Chaim Vital, who became his primary student, was the one who was tasked with writing. Other students also wrote some things, but the Arizal said, don't listen to any of their writings. Only the Rabbi Chaim Vital, he's the trusted conduit.
And he's the one that was in the vision.
And he's the one who was in the vision, which by the way, it's a whole other story into itself, because Rabbi Chaim Vital didn't attach himself to the Arizal right away. Rabbi Chaim Vital, after his teacher, the Ramak, passed away, he left Israel, he went to Damascus. And the Arizal had to schlep him back. It's a whole story. He came to him in a dream. Anyway, for another time. Anyway, the students of the Arizal once asked him why he doesn't write anything. Why does he only talk? He said, it's impossible for me to write. When I think the Kabbalistic thoughts, the streams of wisdom open and I can't contain it. In writing, he says, you should know, even speaking is difficult. To find the narrow pipe, he called it. I have to find the narrow channel to allow the ideas to come through. It's so big, it's so rushing, that even speaking is difficult for me. So Rabbi Chaim Vital became the writer. The Arizal, of course, besides for being a Kabbalist, was also a great rabbi. He was a halachist, he was a Talmudist, he wasn't just a Kabbalist. There's a famous discussion in the Code of Jewish Law, because many times the Kabbalists are at variance with the halachists in certain elements of Jewish law. Certain customs, you do this way, that way, like sitting when you put on tefillin, standing when you put on tefillin, there's different things. So the Shulchan Aruch says, the Alter Rebbe writes this also in his Shulchan Aruch, that whenever the halachists argue with the Kabbalists, you always follow the halachists. Okay? But the Alter Rebbe in his own life, later on in life when he wrote the Sidur, which has also multiple halachic instructions, in the areas where the halachists and the Kabbalists argued, he ruled like the Kabbalists. So somebody asked him, what's going on? You said in the Shulchan Aruch, halacha Kabbalah, halacha wins. And I said, Kabbalah wins? He says, yeah, that's what the halachists say. The halachists say that you have to follow the halachists and come in place of the Kabbalists. But the Kabbalists say that when the Kabbalists and the halachists argue, go with the Kabbalists. So I go with the Kabbalists, you understand? The deeper meaning of it was, it's explained in Chassidus, that we're not talking about Kabbalists who are ignorant in halacha. We're talking about Kabbalists who are, in addition, experts in halacha and also experts in Kabbalah. The Vilna Gaon famously writes, and the Rebbe would quote this very often, that anybody who is not aware of the meaning of a halacha in its higher realms cannot rule on it in this world. He said you have to know how every detail of law is mirrored in the parallel universes to know how to come down with a ruling over here. He said the Kabbalist is the real halachist. In other words, it's like it's a one-up thing, right? So if you're only exposed to halacha, you have this much knowledge. But if you have halacha and Kabbalah, you have an enlightenment that allows you access to an even deeper world. So you have to follow the Kabbalists. So the Arizal had some of that as well, and therefore he wrote actually a Shulchan Aruch, a little version of the Code of Jewish Law. It's called Shulchan Aruch Arizal. The Arizal Shulchan Aruch with different Kabbalistic customs in different areas of Jewish laws. Anyway, Rabbi Chaim Vital attests to the fact that his teacher knew everything there was to know. There was nothing that he didn't know. He eclipsed every one of the Torah sages of his time and before his time. And the Chida, the holy Chida, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, writes that the colleagues of the Arizal, the Bet Yosef, who also lived in Tzfat, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, and Rabbi Moshe Alshich, the famous homiletic Torah commentator, and many others, didn't know 1% of his greatness, he says. 1/100th of his greatness they didn't even know. Unbelievable. How did he have such greatness? How did the Arizal achieve such greatness? There's a couple of points that are mentioned in the books. The Chida himself writes, and he says, this is a personal theory. I never heard it or saw it anywhere, but it has to be, if you ask me. He says that when Eliyahu Hanavi learnt with the Arizal in Egypt, he brought some of the ashes of the para aduma of the red cow and purified the Arizal. He says, and he writes this, Lo ra'iti v'lo shamati. I didn't see this in any books. I didn't hear this from anybody. This is my personal opinion, but it makes the most sense to me. That he underwent a purity like the temple times purity, and that's why his soul was completely different. Other writings say that he had extra kavana, he had extra intent when he made blessings on food. And the one quoted most often in Chassidus is that he had an extra level of simcha shel mitzvah. He put extra joy into doing mitzvahs, and the joy, the Talmud says, Eina shechina shayra ela mitoich simcha. Divine presence rests when you're in a state of joy, and because he had extra joy, so he merited to extra revelations, I guess, extra powers in developing his powers of learning. A contemporary of the Arizal, this is a story not from later, this is a story written in his time, writes about how the Arizal used to be able to see on people's faces their stature. And he writes this in the context of taking care of your pets. His halakha is about taking care of pets or animals that are living by you. So he writes that one day in Tzfat, the Arizal approached a certain sage, and he said, I see on your face that you're tainted with sin. There's a sin in your family, something's happening that's unwanted. He couldn't figure out what it was. Oh no, I'm sorry. He said, I see the sin of tsar ba'alei chayim. I see the sin of paining animals in your home. Couldn't figure out what it was. He goes home, he asks his wife to see what's going on, and he found out that they had a bunch of chickens in their house, and she wouldn't feed the chickens in the morning. Instead, she would let them out to the street, and they had to peck from the garbage in the street to eat. So he told his wife right away, that's changing, starting now. You're going to feed our chickens personally from food that's good for them. And the next morning or 2 days later, the Arizal hadn't even been told about what happened. He came over to him in shul and he said, I see on your face that the sin is gone.
He may have been frightened to be in his presence.
Yes.
Because real things.
He was not, and also he didn't hold back. I heard from somebody who heard from somebody, so I don't know exactly where this is traced to, but he said that the difference between the Baal Shem Tov and the Arizal, he said they can both see everything going on inside your soul, but the Arizal would tell you about it. Baal Shem Tov was very nice to everybody, but the Arizal was not so, he was uncompromising truth. There's an amazing story, if we're talking about the Arizal story, it's just, I don't know if it's connected to the class or the lesson, but there was two friends living in Tzfat. They grew up together. They were childhood friends. And ultimately they both got married and they opened a business together. Now, one of them had children. The other one was not blessed with children, childless. And something happened where the wives got embittered with each other. The wife of the childless woman, the wife who was childless started to harass the one who was blessed with children, and basically the fight got to the families, and it forced the partnership to dissolve. And what ended up happening was that now the guy with children, he didn't make it, and he was down on his luck. He basically became super poor, while the childless guy was thriving and profiting. At some point, the childless man got a blessing from the Arizal to have a child. He was blessed with a baby boy, and he made a huge bris, and he invited everyone to the bris except for this one guy, the friend, that he was on bad terms with. They called the bris for the morning time, and the Arizal himself was supposed to come, but he didn't show up. And you don't do anything if the Arizal's not around. Didn't show up, there's no bris. They waited hours and hours, and mamish 10-15 minutes before sunset, the Arizal came into the shul and they did the bris. They did the bris. Now everyone goes to eat. All of a sudden there's a huge commotion in the kitchen area. Everyone's shouting and screaming. What happened? This huge black dog jumped into a massive pot which held the main dish for the bread, a bunch of fish. Boiling pot, the dog died in the fish, And basically there's no food now for the whole Brit. And people began to start complaining to the Arizal, you were late. If you would have come earlier, and the dog wouldn't have come, and then we could have eaten the meal. Now we have no food, and the whole town is nothing. He said, no. Let me explain to you what happened. I was on the way to the Brit, and I encountered a black dog, this black dog. Now, Arizal, one of his many things, he knew how to speak the language of animals. And the dog said to me, Rebbe, help me. I need help. What's going on? He said, I am a reincarnation of Gehazi. Gehazi was Elisha's servant in the prophets. Elijah the prophet had a student, Elisha. Elisha had an attendant called Gehazi. There's a whole story where Elisha used to visit a woman. She was very kind to him, and he blessed her with a son. The son was 2-3 years old and passed away. She came to complain to Elisha. Elisha wanted to revive the son. And he sent his servant, Gehazi, with a stick. He said, take my staff, touch the child will wake up. But Gehazi didn't believe it. It's like, I'm holding the stick with the power to revive. So in the book of the prophets, it says when he got to the kid, he put the stick and it didn't work. So the Midrash explains why didn't it work. Because on his way, he's like, I'm going to test the stick. He saw a dog on the road, and he touched the dog, and the dog was revived. But I guess he used up the power. So when he got to the kid, it didn't work anymore. So he said, because of this act, I was destined to be reincarnated into a dog. And here I am, I need help, I need a tikkun, I need a rectification. So the Arizal said, it happens to be your lucky day. Do you want to save an entire town from being poisoned? So he said, absolutely, I'll do that if that's my rectification. And the Arizal said, there's one person in this town who's not invited to the bris. It's the friend, the childhood friend of the Bala Simcha, who was offended and on bad terms. He went in to the kitchen and poisoned this pot. That was going to be his revenge. And because of the dog, saved the whole town and also got rectified his soul. Wild story. And there's many such wild stories.
The Arizal could have just shown up and said, I know.
Yeah, I know. These are the big questions on how and when tzaddikim choose to exercise their special powers. I guess he did it in the process of helping a soul, so that was the way to do it. I don't know.
Right.
Makes a better movie with the Kabbalistic.
But the Arizal, he was in tune with different things. He once had a Shabbos nap on 2 weeks ago's portion, Balak. And when he woke up, he said, I saw explanations on the Torah portion of Balak and Bilam of such quantity that it would take me 60 to 80 years to tell you everything I saw. Because when you go visual, you can see much more than we see a piece of art, or you watch a movie and you can speak about it for hours and hours, sometimes days. Years quantity he was able to see in the space of a Shabbos nap. This is crazy stuff. The Arizal, what type of a tzaddik was he? He's known by many names. First of all, the word Arizal, what does Arizal stand for? Well, people think it's Rabbi Yitzchak, that's the Resh and the Yud, Zal, Zichrono Livracha. But what's the Aleph for? Eloki, the godly one. Yeah, Ha-Eloki, Rabbi Yitzchak. He's literally called the godly one. He's also known as Arizal HaKadosh, the holy Arizal. And I think the most interesting title about him is he's called the Ari HaChai, the living Arizal. The living Ari. Why is it called the living Ari? First of all, any tzaddik is called life, life after death. The life continues. Another explanation quoted in Chassidus is because he was attached to the tree of life. All of his Torah came from the tree of life, not from the tree of knowledge. The living Arizal. But the deeper pshat that the Rebbe once said is that every soul has 5 levels. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. According to Kabbalah, the Nefesh resides in the blood, the Ruach in the heart, the Neshama in the brain, and Chaya, Yechida, they are transcendent. We're not in touch with them directly. Most Jews aren't even in touch with the deeper parts of the Neshama in their bodies. We get Nefesh if we're lucky, the Zohar says. The word Chai stands for Chaya, Yechida. The Arizal was a person who related, who lived, who was in touch with the deepest, most transcendent parts of his soul. And if you want to understand what that means for a second, if I can just digress here. Every everything in this physical world is comprised of what Kabbalah calls light and vessels. Everything is orot v'kelim. Light is the core of something. Vessels are the conduit, the vehicle through which light is transmitted. So for example, I'm teaching now, right? So I'm giving a class. The vessels are the words that I choose. But the words are not what I'm trying to communicate. It's the idea that I'm trying to communicate. The idea is the light, the words are the vessels. So, do you need words? Yes, you need them, they're necessary. They're necessary for the light to come through. They're also limiting. Right? You only get access to the light through the vessel. You only get access to the ideas through the words. You don't see the idea in its pure form the way, let's say, I might think about it as the teacher or me in relationship to my teachers. We don't relate to light alone. We only relate to light as it's communicated in a vessel. Think about your body and soul. It's the same thing. Your soul needs your body, otherwise it's raw energy. The only way you know your soul, though, is through your body. So you get access to the soul through the body, but it's limited. The parts of our soul that are transcendent, chaya yechida, that's light without vessels. And the Ari HaChai, along with a select few people in our history, had access, they could relate to light alone. If you wanted to use a metaphor also explored in Chassidus, it's a Torah scroll. You know, a Torah scroll represents our approach to Torah. What's a Torah scroll? It's black letters on white parchment. So in Kabbalah, white represents infinite revelation. Black represents darkness and concealment. Our journey with Torah is trying to get to the light through the letters. So we read the words, we have questions, we have analysis, and we hope that through the portal of the letters we can access the light. But certain people, they weren't blocked by the letters, they went straight for the light. That's what I mean. The Arizal was a man of the light.
Like dreams too. You get the idea without words.
Yes. That's maybe a miniature experience of that. The Arizal lived there. He lived in the light. His student writes that every time he studied a topic in the Torah, he would study it legally, he would interpret it legally in 7 different ways. He found 7 different interpretations to each part of Torah on the legal level. And while he would do this study, he toiled so hard that he would sweat. We sweat with workouts, yeah? We don't sweat with Torah class. Maybe here it's a little hot, I don't know. Tonight we're a little sweating. But he would sweat in his Torah study. But listen to this. Then it says, after he was finished the 7 ways of legal analysis, he would pause and he would expound the subject Kabbalistically, so that his sweat had time to dry and it couldn't be accessed by the negative forces. So the Hasidic masters asked the question, one second, if Kabbalah is deeper than the legal parts of Torah, so if he was sweating by the legal parts of Torah, shouldn't he be sweating even more by the Kabbalah? What do you mean he would pause, expound the Kabbalah so his sweat could dry, like it was a relaxed experience, Kabbalah? And the answer is yes. That's exactly the difference between Kabbalah and the legal parts of Torah. The legal parts of Torah, the revealed parts of Torah, require exertion, they require effort, they require toil. Kabbalah means you're serene, you're at peace, you're in the light. When you're in the light, there's no work. It's the deepest truth. It's the most elusive truth. And this is it. The Arizal is the man whose Torah appeals to everyone. There's nobody today who can't say that they're not influenced by the Arizal in some way, because it's the soul of Torah. It's the vision of there being more to this world. What did he write about? What did he talk about? What was the Arizal's contribution? So, first, I want to give you a very general contribution that the Arizal would always expound on. And then we're going to actually study a text written by the Arizal, time permitting, whatever we can get through. The first thing is the idea of tzimtzum. It says that the Ramak, who was the Arizal's teacher and the previous master of Kabbalah in his time, lo yada me'inyan hatzimtzum. He was not aware of the concept of tzimtzum. And if you read his books, indeed, there's no mention of tzimtzum. He anthologizes all of Kabbalah until his point, but doesn't make mention of the tzimtzum. Now, when I say that, I want to be careful and edit what I say. The idea of tzimtzum as reduction or compression of God's energy is certainly mentioned in his works at length. But what we call relative tzimtzum. Relative tzimtzum means relative reduction. If this level has this much light, the next level has a little bit less light. But the Arizal taught of what's called the quantum tzimtzum, the tzimtzum harishon, the original, the first tzimtzum, which is the leap between infinity and creation. Before the Arizal, this concept was not expounded at all. The Arizal introduced it. He basically opened the chasm between creator and creation to its widest level, on the one hand. On the other hand, he bridged that gap. On the other hand, he taught the dictum of tzimtzum eino kipshuta. The reduction, the compression is not literal. So he taught the tzimtzum, but then he says, he qualifies it, that it's not literal. In the sense that it's a one-sided experience. The tzimtzum is experienced from our side, not from God's side. God is as present in the final product as he is in the original. The example for this is a colored window. The water remains, or water in a colored cup, where the water remains as pure and as infinite and as clear as it is, but when you look through the color, you see the color. The water takes on the color. So the energy was colored by the outside dimensions, but the tzimtzum itself is not kipshuta, which is one of the paradoxes of Lurianic Kabbalah, the idea that there is so much between us and Hashem, and yet so little. If you just go with the theory of no tzimtzum, then yes, you end up close to God, but it's not understood as an infinite type of closeness. But when you preach that there's an infinite quantum leap between one and the other, and that mitzvahs or whatever it is can close that hole, and that in essence the hole is never there to begin with even, the connection becomes that much more powerful, that much more intimate. And that needs another class unto itself, but it's one of the general ideas of Lurianic Kabbalah. Another thing that he contributed to literature, the Jewish literature, is hymns, songs. I don't know how many Shabbat tables you've been around or how many different communities, but at one point or another you're bound to encounter what's called zemirot, zmiros. Zemirot means hymns, songs, liturgies, poems. Either they're about Shabbos, or they're about Jews and Torah, or they're about theme. There are 100 different types of zmiros. Very, very nice ones, actually. Especially in the Polish Hasidic sects. They have beautiful, beautiful zmiros. In Chabad, of course, we have to be different than everybody else. So, no zmiros. The Alter Rebbe did not include any zmiros in his siddur. There's multiple reasons given for that. One reason is because he preferred that we sing wordless melodies. He felt that words limit. Wordless is more infinite and matches the spirit of Shabbos. Nigun, yeah. Another Rebbe said that he prefers that they speak words of Chassidus instead of singing songs. There was one time a deeper occasion where one of the Rebbes said that you can't dictate song singing. It has to come out of you. And when it comes out of you, the song speaks its message. If you force the structure, then you lose the touch, you lose the power. I believe that's the pshat. It could be I'm misquoting it a little bit, but it's like the difference between a chazan, who's just a cantor, who's using the prayers to enhance his melodies, or a true Baal Tefillah, somebody who's using melody to enhance the prayer. You know, it's two different purposes. The Arizal himself actually wrote that to be able to compose a poem, you have to be fluent in Kabbalistic teaching. It's not just who's the better writer, it's who comes with the better words or the better rhymes. You have to be fluent in Kabbalah, and specifically you have to be fluent in Kabbalah, the part of Kabbalah that's called the Shar HaKolel, the all-inclusive gate. This is a whole discussion, but just in short, there are 12 fundamental versions of prayer liturgy corresponding to the 12 different tribes. They're supposed to be that way. Every tribe is supposed to pray in a different way. The Arizal writes that today we only know 4 of the 12. Sepharad, Ashkenaz, I think Yemenite's one of them, and Italian, Nusach. But like when the sea was split, there were 12 paths, and then there was one path for those who were of no tribe, like the Egyptian converts. So there's also in prayer a Sha'ar HaKolel, an all-inclusive gate, where no matter which tribe you're in, that's the one that you can enter through. And that was the Arizal's, what you see in today's Siddur is Nusach Ari, the Arizal's prayer, that's the all-inclusive one. So he said you have to be fluent in the Kabbalah that's accessible to everyone, because you want everyone to say this poem, to say this song, you got to know what you're talking about. And he didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. He composed 3 hymns for Shabbos. He composed one for the Friday night meal, one for the Shabbat day morning meal, and one for the Shabbat afternoon, the third meal, because there's 3 obligatory meals on Shabbos, and Kabbalistically there are 3 different energies, parts of Shabbos. And he composed a hymn for each one. And in fact, the Alter Rebbe included those in his Siddur, so Chabad, even till today, we say those 3 hymns. Or we sing them, there's some nice songs for those hymns. You know what, you have on your source sheet, you can see, I printed in the back, the hymn for the evening of Shabbos. This is just the evening one, the Friday night. It's 20 paragraphs, and I don't know how fast you'll be able to grasp this, but if you look at the first letter of each of the paragraphs, it's an acrostic. The first 3, Aleph Nun Yud, Ani, I am. The next 4, Yitzchak, Yud Tzadik Chet Kuf. The next 5, Luria, I am Yitzchak Luria. Bet Nun, Ben, son of. And then you have Shin, and I'll soon tell you why there's 2 shins, but it's Shin Lamed Mem Hey, Shlomo, and the Aleph is for his last name, Ashkenazi. Ani Yitzchak Luria ben Shlomo Ashkenazi. So he hinted his name in the song. And the same is true of the Shabbat day song, which I don't have a copy of, but it's called Asader Lisudasa. Over there it just says, Ani Yitzchak Luria. I am Isaac. Luria doesn't have the father's name. And in the Shabbat, even in the Shabbat afternoon one, there's no Ani. There's no I, it just says Yitzchak Luria. And I believe that it has to do not just with the fact that he wanted to let us know who wrote the poem, but because his name reflects the different energies of Shabbat. Yitzchak, as is taught in the Zohar multiple times, was Gevura. Avraham was Chesed, Yitzchak was Gevura. Gevura people think of as tough and harsh and angry, but it's not really. Gevura is exactitude, precision, being, in tune with Hashem's infinity as it's supposed to be. He was very exacting and precise, the Arizal, and that's part of the energy of Shabbos, confronting an order and a setup that's required. At the same time, in the beginning of Shabbat, there's room for Ani, there's room for I. As you approach the end of Shabbat, there's no Ani. It's the highest level of intimacy with Hashem, the I disappears. That's why in the Shabbat afternoon song, there's no Ani in the acrostic. That's part of what I've never seen this written up clearly, but it seems to be the meaning.
It's Chasam, right?
Huh?
It's Chasam. Rabbi Shlomo Al-Chabez wrote.
Yes,
He
Lechadodi.
did the same thing.
Lechadodi is also Rabbi Shlomo Al-Kabetz, put his name exactly. Yeah, this was a very common thing, but obviously Arizal didn't run out of words and couldn't come up with enough paragraphs, so he had to, this is obvious. The student understands that there's depth here. So if you want to appreciate the meaning of these hymns, you have to really appreciate the meaning of Shabbat in Kabbalah. And so let me take 5 minutes and talk about this for a second.
Why the extra shin though?
Huh? I'll tell you about the extra in a minute. I'll tell you, yeah. I'll tell you what I read in one of the commentaries. I'm sure there's more commentaries, but first like this. What is Shabbat? There's one word that defines Shabbat. It's ta'anug, pleasure. Even on the literal level, we're supposed to beautify Shabbos and make it very pleasurable. Have a beautiful table, beautiful foods, delicacies. We're supposed to dress up in our finest and have an incredible meal and everything. It's all about pleasure. And it's actually holy pleasure. There's no, typically when a person eats food, you can get dragged down by the food. On Shabbos, whatever you eat is holy. But the spiritual, mystical side of it is that Shabbat is a day of pleasure and delight in God. It's a day of unifying with the essence that's at the core of the fabric of reality. And the way you have to think about this is, again, using the physical lens of Shabbat as a metaphor. we are told the reason that we have Shabbat is because Hashem created the world in 6 days, rested on the seventh. So too you work 6 days a week and you rest on the seventh. If you think about it, even if a person loves what he does, they say, love what you do, don't work a day in your life. The truth is that even if you love what you do, when you're engaged in work, it's not fun. When you're doing the work is tedious. Doing the work requires focus, even if you love your job. Delight, pleasure, only comes in pause, only comes in moments of stopping. An artist, while he's brushing the paint, is super laser focused, cannot be disturbed, and is exerting all of his mental effort to stay there. Then he pauses, moves back to reflect on the work. He enjoys what he did. He can also see what needs to be changed and go forward. That's what we believe, according to Kabbalah, is Shabbat. All week, we work. When we work, we're not just working physically, we're working spiritually. All of our existence, we believe, is what's called avodat habirurim, the work of correction and repair. God rests in order. God rests in harmony, in balance. But the world is entangled and chaotic, and we're here to separate those strands and bring clarity to this world. That's the work. The work is not easy. The work is not fun. The work involves our mind and our heart and our soul. On Shabbat, we pause. Shabbat is the time to sit back, admire and reflect our past week, get motivation and inspiration for the coming week. That's the pleasure of Shabbos. The pleasure of just, menucha. Like, look what we've done, and look what we're going to do. It's not a rest of being tired or being bored, It's an active rest. It's the rest that's required in order to be able to appreciate and move forward.
What does menucha mean?
Menucha means rest. Yeah. Within the rest of Shabbat, there's 3 parts. Even the Talmud speaks about this. Friday night, Shabbat morning, and Shabbat afternoon. The way Kabbalah explains it is, on Friday night, you're still coming home from the week. You're coming home from work. So the pleasure of Friday night is a direct pleasure from the work. Check out what I did. Here's my painting. Here's my building. By the time Shabbat morning comes, we've already eaten, slept, prayed. Now the pleasurable experience is what Kabbalah calls pleasure from the pleasure. If you want to think about it again using a metaphor, think about it like this, okay? You have a job, right? And you like what you did. You finished a house, or you finished a painting. I'm just using those 2 examples, okay? But whatever, you finished a data entry sheet, whatever it is for you, okay? One part of the admiration is, hey, look what I did. That's pleasure from the project. The other way to say it is, hey, look what I did. I just did something that I've always wanted to do. So it's pleasure from the pleasure. It's pleasure from the happiness itself that you could do that which you wanted. That's the Shabbat morning's pleasure. It's you're more in touch, not so much with the work, but with the result that's been accomplished. Yeah. And then once you get to Shabbat afternoon, it's a whole different thing. It's a time of yearning. It's a time of trying to get to the transcendence, that which is always elusive and out of reach. Yeah. And that's why in the Arizal's hymns, you can see these themes repeated. Just look at the first word. The first word of the Shabbat evening hymn, Azamer. Azamer literally translates as I will sing, like Zmirot. But if you look at the translation that I put on the side, it says there, I will cut away. The word for pruning in the Torah, when it describes a sabbatical year, no harvesting the field, no pruning the field, is tizmor. Azamer means cutting away. I will cut away the forces of evil with songs of praise. Meaning that the work of Shabbat evening is still dealing with cutting away that which remains from the week. You're divorcing yourself from that energy. You're disassociating in order to be able, if we're already read the rest of the paragraph, in order to enter the holy gates of Chakal Tapuchim. That means the apple orchard, which is a reference to Gan Eden. If you want to enter the holy gates, you need to cut away the forces of evil. That's what real holiness is. People often say that the metaphor for holiness is oil, right? oil, you put it with the water, eventually it rises to the top. But it isn't the most accurate metaphor, because oil can still contact with water, and if you had a real good blender, you could blend it in. True holiness, the word Kiddusha means removed, completely removed. If you want to enter a holy environment, you must be completely removed from that which opposes it. And so the first exercise on Shabbat is to cut away all of the energies that are accompanying you into the week, accompanying you from the week into Shabbat. But then by Shabbat morning, and again I didn't print it, it's a shame, the first word of the hymn is asader, I will make order. Because once you're already in the zone of Kedusha, you can make the proper order. And in the afternoon song, it doesn't say anything about order or cutting away, it just says the members of the chamber, ksifin, they yearn to that which is above and transcendent. So I really wanted to get into some of the commentary on the hymn, but I see we're already running low on time, so I'm just going to tell you, you asked me about why there's two shins. If you look at the first paragraph of the shin, so it's paragraph number 15, it says, Shechimta tit atar, may the Shekhinah be surrounded, bishit nahamei listar, by the 6 loaves on each side of the table, which is a reference, right? Bevavin tit katar, may they correspond to the 2 sets of 6 loaves and the other articles of the Bet HaMikdash. It was lechem hapanim, the showbread, on the Bet HaMikdash. So many people that follow Kabbalistic teachings, because of this, they will put 12 challahs on their table to replicate the lechem hapanim. Now today, we do a little different. We do bevavin tit katar, we do 2 vavs, 2 long challahs, which is why, by the way, the rest of the year we're supposed to have long challahs, not round ones. Round is for Shana for a different reason, for the new year, but typically we're supposed to have long challahs because they're 2 vavs. But in the wording, in the literal wording, it says 12 challahs. So one of the commentaries to the Azam Rabbi Shvachin writes that if you don't have 12 challahs on your table, you cannot recite this chapter, this paragraph of the hymn, because the Shekhinah is not going to rest if you don't have the 12 loaves. So perhaps he suggests that's why the Arizal wrote 2 shin paragraphs. One for the guy who puts the 12 loaves on his table, and just in case you don't, I have another shin for you, another thing. Anyway, there's many, many, many secrets that are revealed through the Azam Rabbi Shvachin. Maybe I'll record it after the class. I'll add it into the video version. But look at the very end. The last 2 paragraphs, the Arizal himself wonders. Chapter 19, he asks, aren't we discussing secrets of Torah which are not revealed, hidden and concealed? What are we doing? We're revealing all this stuff, we're spilling all the juice. And he answers, the bride is crowned with supernal mysteries at this joyous feast of the holy angels. Shabbos is a time when the Shekhinah is in a revealed state. It's being basically blessed with the energy from the entire week and from Hashem himself, which is also part of the commentary on this hymn. And that is the reason why on Shabbat we're all raised to a different level of consciousness and can discuss the inner meaning of the Shabbat delight and hopefully experience a little bit of that Shabbat delight for ourselves. And with that, we'll say L'chaim and conclude the class.